In Satanism, evil is not an inherent trait or an impulse without control, rather, it is a concept wielded deliberately, carefully, and, most importantly, purposefully. Within this framework, evil exists not as an absolute state or as a defining label, but as a focused energy reserved for those who disrupt balance, harm without cause, or impose control over the free will of others. Satanists do not embody evil for evil's sake. Instead, they engage with this force, using it with precision and intent, most often in rituals aimed at protecting personal sovereignty and standing firm against injustice. Traditional morality tends to paint evil with a broad brush, depicting it as an active desire to inflict harm. But in Satanism, particularly in theistic and traditional branches, evil is not an uncontrolled or inherently chaotic force. It is a tool, an expression of power reserved for self-defense or the rectification of harm caused by others. The Satanist does not inflict evil indiscriminately, rather, they recognize it as an action, invoked consciously and specifically when pushed to defend their autonomy or respond to a genuine threat. In this sense, evil becomes a mirror, reflecting back only what was received, only what was deserved. The concept of justifiable evil is one of Satanism's most misunderstood aspects, often confused with malice or cruelty. From a Satanist's perspective, the term evil is a boundary line. It is neither a virtue nor a vice, but a response mechanism invoked to restore balance. Satanists do not seek harm without purpose. Rather, they act in alignment with a deeply held belief in justice and personal sovereignty. If evil is used in ritual, it is a focused act of self-defense, a means of restoring equilibrium, especially against those who impose on others without cause. For the Satanist, evil is not darkness for darkness's sake, but darkness wielded as a form of balance, a return to rightful order. Mainstream ideologies, whether religious, social, or ethical, often discourage any engagement with evil, portraying it as something inherently corrupting. However, to the Satanist, this is an oversimplification, a distortion of what evil can represent when properly understood. Evil, within Satanic practice, is an acknowledgement of the dual nature of existence. It is an understanding that, in a world often fraught with unjust aggression and repression, there are times when one must act in self-preservation. Such actions are not undertaken lightly or recklessly, they are considered responses, manifestations of power aimed at redressing wrongs or pushing back against undue harm. In rituals where evil might be invoked, there is often a target, someone or something that has violated personal sovereignty or inflicted harm without provocation. This ritual is not mindless aggression but a calculated, deliberate act of self-defense. The Satanist views this form of ritual as a means of reclaiming balance, of reinforcing boundaries against those who would trample upon them. To use evil in this manner is not to embrace cruelty but to embody resilience, to stand firm in the face of oppression. Some may argue that any act of evil, however justified, feeds into negative energy. Yet within Satanism, it is not seen this way. Evil, when invoked with intent, becomes an act of clarity. It is a line drawn in the sand, a declaration that one's autonomy will not be infringed upon without consequence. This approach rejects the blanket morality that assumes harm in all situations is equal. Instead, Satanism accepts complexity, acknowledging that some actions deemed evil by society may, in fact, be acts of protection, of rightful retaliation, especially when justice has been denied. Thus, in Satanism, evil is less about morality and more about balance. It exists not as an intrinsic quality, but as a response when balance has been disrupted by those who abuse their power or impose their will upon others unjustly. Theistic Satanism, in particular, frames evil as a necessary tool, a counterpart to light that restores equilibrium in a world that does not always reward fairness or respect free will. Here, the act of engaging with evil becomes a defense mechanism, an assertion that boundaries, once crossed, will be defended. The Satanist understands that power, like nature, cannot always be soft or forgiving. Sometimes it must be fierce, unyielding, even severe. Evil, in this light, is a form of restraint, a marker of the limits one sets for those who overstep. The act is not gratuitous, it is proportional, reflective, and purposefully directed toward those who, by their own actions, have justified its invocation. In essence, Satanism's relationship with evil is not a free pass to act maliciously but an invitation to explore the nature of power, balance, and justice. Evil, then, is not a lure into darkness, but a path to integrity, a refusal to allow harm without consequence, a stance that one's sovereignty will not be undermined. The Satanist, by invoking evil, steps into a space where self-defense is not just a right but a duty, reinforcing the principle that every action carries weight, that justice, in its purest form, is found in balance. In Satanism, the notion of evil is not taken at face value. Unlike the simplistic moral binaries often found in mainstream ideologies, Satanism views evil as something defined, shaped, and, indeed, created by human beliefs and perceptions. When we examine what society deems evil, we find that these judgments are largely informed by religious doctrines, particularly those of Christianity, which has historically categorized Satan, darkness, and the unknown as inherently sinister. From a Satanist perspective, evil is not an inherent force in the universe but a human construct, one used to instill fear, maintain control, and enforce conformity. Much of what mainstream society views as evil arises from Christian teachings that cast nonconformity, rebellion, and individualism in a negative light. Satanists, however, do not inherit these definitions blindly. Instead, we scrutinize and challenge them, shaping our own understanding based on personal judgment, self-empowerment, and lived experience. The Christian interpretation of evil has largely painted certain behaviors, beliefs, and practices as universally wicked. Satanism, viewed through this lens, becomes synonymous with everything evil because it defies Christian morality. Yet, in Satanism, we do not simply invert Christian morals, we redefine them entirely. For a Satanist, evil is not an absolute, it is situational, contextual, and deeply personal. It is not dictated by scripture or dogma but by one's own moral compass, which is shaped through experience and self-awareness rather than external doctrines. Consider, for instance, acts of self-assertion, independence, or resistance. Within Christian morality, these can be construed as sinful, rebellious, or even evil because they challenge submission to an external deity's authority. But in Satanism, these are not evil acts, they are affirmations of one's freedom, agency, and individuality. The Satanist does not abide by definitions imposed by others, instead, they define their own path, making decisions based on personal ethics rather than inherited doctrines. In many ways, evil as it is traditionally understood is a projection, a product of human fear and misunderstanding. Humans, guided by religious interpretations, have cast certain actions, thoughts, and beings as evil because they threaten established norms or beliefs. For Satanists, however, evil is not a matter of conforming to an inherited idea, it is about making choices aligned with one's truth, even if those choices defy conventional morality. By embracing this self-defined approach, Satanists reject the labels and judgments handed down by Christian teachings. We do not fear the word evil, nor do we adopt it without question. Instead, we reclaim and repurpose it, seeing it as a term that represents our refusal to submit to external authorities or inherited moralities. In this way, Satanism empowers individuals to make their own decisions about right and wrong, asserting that morality is a personal journey, not a set of rigid rules dictated by society or religion. Ultimately, evil is not a force outside of humanity, it is an idea created, maintained, and wielded by humans to enforce conformity. As Satanists, we make our own decisions and definitions, acknowledging that each person has the right to define their moral landscape. We recognize that evil is fluid, changing, and deeply personal. In doing so, we challenge the narratives of fear, control, and dogma, choosing instead a path of self-determination and personal sovereignty.